Hello, so in this video I just want to kind of introduce the organics brief and just show you how very simple this organics brief is at the beginning. In general, the organics kind of process is quite an easy one. Um, Most of the look, aesthetic and things that we recognize as organics can purely be brought down to either simple textures or just chaos essentially. So if you look at like a lawn of grass, you don't necessarily see individual blades of grass unless you get close up. What you see is a sea of green in different kind of like verdant kind of contrasts. Essentially, that's what we'll be looking at now. But what I want to do is just introduce the concept of organic as a technical thing, not necessarily the theory around organics. We'll be looking at that a little bit more, but just basically the technical concept of organics. So what I've got here is a simple plane. That's all I need, just a simple square plane. I don't even need to UV it because as a square, it fits into my UV sheet anyway. So I don't really need to do anything to it. And I'm just going to do most of my work inside Photoshop. There we go. So there you go. So the simple kind of theory behind organics is, or behind the technical term is, technical, what we're looking at is, we have a texture, that texture has some sort of shape on it, like this. We only want to see the leaf. We only want to see this shape. So we have our texture with all the colors, of course, of that. We have our greens, our blues, whatever. We also might have a roughness map. We also might have an emission map or something. Cool. But to actually get this shape to only look like the leaf and we don't get the outside is all the area around the leaf, it's going to be black. That's as simple as it needs to be. So when we do our organic, say if we're doing something like a leaf, so boom, right there we've got a leaf. We've got a leaf shape. We have one map, which is just a black and white map, a white silhouette of a leaf with a black background. If it's 0 or black, it's invisible. It's see-through. If it's white, or if it's 1, it's opaque. It means we can see it. And that's a simple kind of example of what we need to do. Now, there are varying degrees of black and white, obviously. So we do, inside this whole transparency realm, this whole see-through realm, we can have 50% grays, which means it's semi-transparent. We're not going to be doing that for this. We can experiment with it, with some stuff, but generally we're going to be using just the black and white. We've got a flat silhouette of a leaf and then a background. So let's actually do that. Let's actually go and do some stuff. All right, so all I'm going to do is, first of all, just bring in any color background. Don't really matter at first, because what I want to do is I want to give myself a grid to work from. Now, those of you who are familiar with Photoshop will know how to do this, but Control R will turn on and off the grid, or the rules, I should say. And if I right click this, I can see all these different sizes here. So I'm also just going to make sure that I'm working to a correct texture size. So I'll go to images, image size, and I'll go 2048. Yeah, sure. 2048 is fine. So remember 5, 12, 1024, 2048, those are our sizes. Yeah, so if I right click this ruler, which has appeared, so Control R, I'm going to go to percent. And basically what I'm going to do is start dragging off, and I start dragging out this line here. Now, if I hold Shift while I'm dragging out one of these lines, I start snapping to whole increments in the percentile. So 0% there. Basically what I want to do is break this up into, at first, let's say 25%. So I'm breaking this up into 4 by 4. So I'm going to have 16 different versions of whatever. So like that, 25. Drag my next one into 50. And drag my last one into 75. And then do the same thing here. Drag this into 25. Drag this into 50. Drag this into 75. Now, why am I doing this? basically what I'm doing here is I'm just giving myself a little area to work in each one of these little quads, in each one of these little zones. It's going to allow me just to basically have a nice area to put a texture in. It makes sure that if I'm applying a texture to this, or if I'm applying this to something, that I've not got another texture kind of overlapping. Because what I don't want to do, for instance, is have a shape from, say, here. So we've got zone 1, then we've got zone 2 here. What I don't want to have is a leaf kind of coming in and interacting with zone 1. And I don't want zone 1 to then be interacting with zone 5. So basically what I'm doing here is just setting up a nice little grid that I can work to. And just to make it nice and clear for myself, I am also going to just start drawing a grid down here as well. So a little bit of setup just for myself. Eventually I will get rid of this grid anyway, but while I'm working, I just kind of have it there. Right, so I'm just going to invert this and you'll see why in a sec. Invert. So I'm going to bring a new layer. This is going to be my background, and I'm just going to fill this black. So remember that because we're working off a black and white scale, black being see-through, completely transparent, and white being completely opaque, I want to have my background be black. So I'm working for that. And then on top of there, I'm going to have my shapes of my leaves, shapes of my grass, shapes of my whatever. So I'll call this. So background. I'll call this my shapes. There we go. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is just quickly draw out, if I just move my tab a bit closer. What I'm going to do is just quickly draw out some simple silhouettes of grasses or leaves or whatever. You know, I would have done my research and kind of decided what my shapes are going to be. Get the right tool for this. There we go. So I'm not super fussed as well about the beginning. If it's a bit rough, that's fine. I can just, you know, clean it up. Again, what do we do in illustration? We do a rough sketch and then we clean it up later on. As long as my inside can be white, that's all I'm bothered about. Cool. Now let's say that's leaf 1, and then I've gone through and I've made different variations of that one leaf. Now these variations obviously can be down to shape. So I can do stuff like I can make it a bit wider. I can just do some stuff. Use my imagination and my illustration skills to make some variations and stuff. That's all I've got to do. Okay. And those are my 3 variations. Obviously, I just want to put down that I've quickly just done this just to show you the setup, but obviously we're going to take a lot longer to make our shapes, to make our silhouettes and stuff. Cool. So what I'm going to do is literally just not delete it, but just uncheck my my grid. Let's call it grid, so that I know at least it's there, but I just don't need it on my image that I'm going to take out. So I'm going to save this out as a, sorry about that. I'm going to save this to my project folder, which I've made. So remember, again, I need our project folder. So I'm going to go organics. I'm going to save this into my images. I'm going to call this leaves 1 opaque for my opacity. Let's jump back to Photoshop, and this is where it gets really, really cool. So what I'm going to do is just grab my thing. I'm going to apply a new material. So holding right click, going down to assign favorite material. I'm going to apply a blend to this. So I got my transparency because I've got some cool stuff I can do with this. So I go to my blend. Let's call this leaves 1 because that's what it's associated to. I apply not my color, so I don't care about my color, but I'm going to my transparency. I'm going to come in here, click File, look for that file, go to my images folder on my leaf or opaque, turn on textures, boom. So you can see there that we've got the, let's make it a good cool color, there we go. We've got our leaves, but we've got a transparent background. Now also what you can see is that we have also got the transparency of that blend kind of interacting, so we're not quite as realistic or quite as good looking as we could be, but you can see the transparency clearly working. It's very, very cool. You can see separation between each one of these. Now I'm going to take the exact same transparency map, I'm going to apply it to my specular color. Now I don't need to do this so much. I'm doing this just to kind of show off what we can do inside Photoshop, not in Photoshop, sorry, Maya. But you can see there that because I'm basically using the exact same process, black in this case means no specularity whatsoever, white means 100% the specularity. What we've now got is on our leaves, we've got some specularity. Super nice, right? And what that means is, again, I'm just going to go in and do some quick dirty duplicates like that. Is that I could hypothetically just set up I could set up 16 variations of a single leaf to pick from. And then I can just save that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save over the top of this. Jump back to Maya, update that. Very cool. And that's just a white silhouette. So this, when I'm doing organics, I normally go in and start with just a white silhouette of something, because that's going to control my general shape. I'm going to make sure that I've got enough variation. If I'm doing like a big scene, I want to do a lot of variation. If I'm doing a relatively small scene, I want to make sure that I've got some variation, not so much that I'm kind of got like, you know, a new unique texture per item, per model, whatever. Just enough so I get some variation. So it might be like 4 or 6 or whatever. So I could use, if I'm doing say like 4 types of grasses, I could have like this top area here be one type of grass, and then this other, so I could have 4 variations. Oops, 4 variations of 4 types of grasses, which is kind of cool. It still gives me 16 grass variations to play with. It's just there's going to be 4 grass types. Okay. Now from here, why I start off with this is because I can texture this really, 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 really quickly, or really easily, simply by using clipping layers. Now again, I don't know how this works in other softwares. I do know it works in Procreate. I don't know how it works in Art Studio or whatever. This is why I keep saying Photoshop's your best friend for this, because I know how to do stuff with it, so I can help you with it. But if I make a new layer, if I make sure it's above my shapes, whatever's controlling my whatevers, I'm going to just, again, this might be something you're like, well, duh, Dave, we know how to do this already. But bear with me, because I don't know, I just want to make sure that we are covering stuff. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to make a big old mess on my page like that. Go right click, and then I'm going to come to Create Clipping Mask. Now what Create Clipping Mask does is it basically uses the pixel information underneath as a mask. So anywhere where you do get pixels, it'll show through this layer that's attached to it. You can see there, you can see the red is going across, but inside the area where there is no pixels, it doesn't show up. So this means for our textures is we can do some really quick texturing. And again, this is nothing new. I'm not doing anything that's particularly unique. I'm not doing anything that's particularly groundbreaking. I'm just basically thinking of how I texture stuff if I'm painting. Because essentially all I'm doing here is painting leaves to then put in a scene later on. So I'm setting up some variations. There you go, we got some variation. That's a bit too much like the other one. Yeah, there you go. So we've got 4 variations of 4 different leaf types there. You can even see where we've got our stripes inside the arm. And then again, I'm going to set up another layer. Make a clipping mask. Turn this into a multiply, and then I can do my shadows. Now, if I'm being very efficient or very kind of lazy, let's say, I could do my one, and I'm doing something like this where I've got the same shapes for, like, say, column A is all the same shape, column B is all the same shape. And I'm using the same shadow or the same kind of, like, you know, highlight and shadow information on each of them. I could just do my top row and then basically duplicate it down. So I come in here and I'm going to use some fancy shadows. Let's nice purpley shadow. Let's get some. And this is why I really like this kind of texturing process, because I'm texturing in the edge here. You cannot see it. You can kind of see it cropping up in here inside the little thumbnail, but you can't actually see it here. So what I can do is just come in and do some shadowing. Now what I do have to remind myself to do is actually step back a little bit and not worry about getting too close in, because the thing with organics is it's all about the 5-foot rule. If it looks good from 5 foot away, you're good. You know, you're okay. Because there's going to be so much of this clustered together that the one thing I really want to avoid is very obvious repetition. And by avoiding very obvious repetition, or how I avoid very obvious repetition, is by just trying to make my textures as chaotic and random as possible, or like as non-structured as possible. So I don't want to get any like really strict straight lines, because organics, the thing that is tricky about organics is, I've said it before, chaos. You know, in nature there's pure chaos until you get into like the macro level and start seeing that there's actual like there's patterns in nature which kind of relate to maths and stuff, and then that gets really cool and trippy. Like the Fibonacci sequence, but that's not what I want to worry about. Which is, I just want to make sure that my text is looking good. So there you go. And then I'm going to do another layer. Again, clipping mask it. And this one's going to be, I'm going to take this yellow. I'm just going to use my illustration skills just to kind of throw in a little bit of the shape and form. And then because I'm working with these flat layers and all these are separate, I can come in and go like, well, that purple maybe is a bit too intense. So I can color balance that stuff, or even hue and saturation actually. Yeah. So use hue and saturation to just maybe shift it towards the blues a little bit. Yeah. Like that. And once I've got like a basic kind of framework in there, then I can come up a little bit closer and tighten it up a little bit. So make sure I'm getting that color correct. Here we go. Now this is the most like Illustrator friendly portion of 3D, is just doing these nice simple textures. So those of you who are like very illustrative or very kind of like 2D animation kind of focused, this is literally the assignment for you. It's all about just illustration. All I'm wanting to do here is just get I want to get these shapes in there. So you can see there, I'm just going in a little bit more. There's the detail. I'm not going to spend too long with that. So, because obviously in the assignment I would spend longer doing this. So I wait for each leaf. It kind of looks like a brain from afar, like that. Now, what's a really great thing as well is I've only just done one leaf, and I'm kind of looking at this. I'm thinking, well, maybe I could make these a little bit more efficient. So I'm actually going to get rid of my rulers just by grabbing them. Make sure I'm pressing V to be in a movement mode. V for movement. I'm just going to drag them, pull them off like that. So what I'm going to do is actually move these shapes closer together. These are very, very thin shapes. So what I can do is, oh, you can see it there at the top when I'm kind of encroaching on stuff. So I can move these closer together, and then I could possibly fit even more variations in here, or more versions of things, or more elements of whatever. So if I have all my leaves, oops, I have all my leaves coming over like that. One thing I'm looking for is just making sure that I don't have anything crossing over. Like that. So again, I'm still making sure that these are sitting inside their own little zones. But because these are very, very thin and tall, I can just kind of crush them into a little bit smaller area. Okay. So I'm going to do save this out again. Oh, no, I'm going to do this. There we go. So, oops, wrong one. So save this out, export this as this. Yep. And then turn these back on. Save this. Now this is going to be my diffuse. Let's call this diffuse, or diff, my diffuse. Jump back into Maya, update that. Because I've now got a color, I can inject that into there. Nice. So when I first start off this whole thing, I might just work with this, right? Like just a flat plane, just to get everything working. Even in my, I might be taking this into Sketchfab for a while, because one thing I've not done is dressed my scene. I could take this into Sketchfab to check if the materials are working, just like take it in as like an unpublished project, and just kind of like make sure that my roughness map is working nicely on this, making sure that my whatever is working nice on this. And then I can come back in Maya and start doing stuff. So I've done some texturing. All these have been kind of textured to my liking. Everything's looking good. Like, why have I just kept everything on one thing? Why haven't I kept everything as like individual leaf shapes and stuff? Well, that's because if I move this over to the side and then duplicate this, this here is going to be my hero piece. This is never going to be adjusted. This is never going to be broken up, because everything, if I ever update this texture, this is going to reflect the update. So if I start adding like grasses to the side here, flower petals, vines, whatever, this is going to reflect it. And if I need to, I can just duplicate off another one. This one I've just duplicated off here. This is what I'm actually going to use to build stuff. So I'm going to pretend that I've got like a tree made in the background and stuff, and I want to start making some of these leaves kind of attached to the surface. Well, that's very, very easy. All I'm going to do is grab our multi-cut tool, start putting some cuts in, and basically start breaking this up like this. So you can see there manually I've just started putting stuff in. Now what I'm not going to do is move these vertexes around at the minute, because you can see there it's starting to affect the UV. But all I'm going to do is basically break them up into their own little chunk, so that I can come in here, delete all the stuff I don't want. So all this, get rid of that. And then I can just separate each one of these off into its own thing. like that. Now each one of these is its own individual thing. Literally all I've been doing then is just selecting a face in face mode, hitting extract, and boom, that's it. Easy. And then just make sure I'm center pivot on each one of these, so it's all pivots in the center of each one of them. So like I said, they're all like individual faces now, which is smashing. So what I can do is I can start to use these for their intended purpose. Maybe these are sat on the floor, maybe these are attached to a tree. One thing I can do now that I've kind of separated this off, maybe I want this to be a little bit more dynamic than what it's looking like. Because this currently, yeah, it looks okay, but it's very flat. You know, leaves in general in nature aren't very flat. So what I'm going to do is, again, come in with my multi-cut tool. And I'm going to put a center line down the middle. It doesn't matter that the tip of the flower, tip of the leaf is off to one point and the base of the leaf is off a little bit. It really doesn't matter for what I'm about to do. And then I'm just going to evenly split, let's call it 3 edges across the middle like that. Because what I can do now is literally just start carefully just moving stuff. Oh, there you go. There we got there. Is a well more dynamic leaf. Now, one thing you will be looking at, guaranteed people will be worrying about this, is we're looking at this and we're thinking, oh, this looks really rubbish on its own. Well, of course it does, because we're looking at this on its own. But again, thinking about chaos, thinking about nature, things are chaotic in nature, so things start to get like put together and you know, things sit with each other and sit a bit weird. So now this is less rubbish looking because there's less just focusing on one leaf and seeing all the issues with that one leaf and more about look at the chaos, look at the group of leaves. Now you might see some clipping. I will say, like, I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but you kind of see some clipping around here. If you see anything like that in Maya, don't worry about it. Like this, you can see prime weirdness going on there. Where the thing that's at the bottom, this face, which is at the bottom, is actually being drawn on top of everything else. Don't worry about that. It's just literally just Maya. Maya's not set up for this particular view to work super great with transparency. When we're rendering stuff, it doesn't matter because then it works. But for this, it doesn't matter. We're only checking stuff in here. So you can see there, a little group of leaves pulled together, looking nice. Now, because these are also pulling from the exact same texture, what happens is any changes I make in here will then be reflected in our proper texture, in our proper scene. So I'm going to just do a little bit of bring in a little bit more colour. Oops. So now at least when I override the color map of this, because I'm not changing the opacity map at all, but when I change the color map of this, these obviously get all updated, which is really, really nice. So you can see I can start off with a super basic shape and then gradually build upon it. gradually build upon it. And again, that's why I have this as like my master texture checker, let's call it. So I can come here and check all the different textures, check how they're looking. If I need to do something like this, where I'm using the individual leaves and stuff, I just duplicate off another one of these. Because from now on, it's just all about chaos and bringing in some of that randomness which is in nature. You can see there that issue with the transparency. Now I will show you the way of actually fixing this. It's going to fix one thing, but then it's going to cause a bit of an issue for other stuff. I have a visual issue, but if I come up to renderer and then to the channel box, for the option box for renderer 2.0, all I'm going to do is transparency algorithm. I'm going to go down to depth peeling, and that will sort it out. However, we do get some noise. You see where some of that noise is kind of occurring around here. So unavoidable. But we're only doing it in Maya just to check if things are actually, looking all right. You see, I've got like a little bit of a little bushel thing going on. So that's how simple it can be. That's how simple the basic concept is. Obviously, I've not gone super hard into this and gone hours after hours after hours of texturing, because I don't need to. The basics is it's all in Photoshop. We start off with our basics. We start off with our basic leaf shapes, our flower shapes, our whatever. Obviously, I've just done leaves here, but we start off with our basics. We find the silhouette of the basics. We make sure that that works in transparency. And then very easily we can just add, using like these clipping masks, add color, the flat color. And then we start to build upon more and more shadow and value, whatever. Because then we could just use the exact same leaf multiple times by duplicating it off and duplicating it and duplicating it and duplicating it. And then arranging it, and then adding a few more edges to this new individual face to give it a bit more kind of shape and randomness. And again, if I wanted to do a different kind of edit to this, all I have to do is duplicate off this, and then pick out that one leaf shape again, and then carry on working like that. So we'll do this with grass. So grass can be broken up into one leaf shape, or one kind of blade shape, or 3 blade shapes, or whatever, and then we just randomly distribute that across a surface thousands of times, absolutely thousands of times. Because there is, again, one thing with this kind of organics workflow we need to think about after we've got the basics of our textures working is the chaos of the thing we're trying to do, the kind of thing we're trying to replicate, be it tree limbs, be it flower beds, be it grass, be it whatever. There's chaos there because things are kind of growing in their own way and kind of vying to be seen by the sun and stuff. So short video, but just showing you just the basics of what we're going to be covering at first. The next video is going to be showing you how to do lots of variations of stuff. So using this concept, but doing a little bit of very, very basic modeling work to then produce, lots of variations of flowers and grasses. And then again, you'll see how simple this stuff is. Okay, next video.